Good evening. Right, get the eyes on. Okay. So I welcome everyone to full council meeting, including any members of the public who may be attending remotely. Please be advised that the meeting will be live streamed and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. The following staff are in attendance: Chief Executive, Monitoring Officer and Democratic Services. Agenda item 1 is the emergency evacuation procedure. There is no scheduled test of the fire alarm, and if the alarm does sound, please leave the building quickly using the doors signed as fire escapes and assemble in the car park at the front of the building and await instructions. If there is anyone in attendance that might require assistance in evacuating the building, please let themselves know now. Anyone? No? Okay. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. I invite the Chief Executive to give apologies, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've received apologies from councillors Mike Baldock, Roger Clark, Derek Carnell, Mike Henderson, Claire Martin, Hannah Perkin and James Hall.
Are there any others that anyone knows about?
Councillor Rich Lehman.
I think we said that. Oh, I didn't. Okay. Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes. Sorry.
Thank you. Just for notes, I think he's online, but Councillor Tucker is online rather than in attendance this evening.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, you can't see those screens up there. Need a back.
Just to say that the two councillors that are online, Councillor Mark Tucker and Rich Lehman, will not be able to vote. Thank you.
Councillor Jays.
I understand Councillor Jays is also online, so we'll add him to the list of apologies, and Councillor Jays will not be able to vote either. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 3 is the minutes to approve the minutes of the last council meeting held on the 15th of November 2023. Minute numbers 414 to 427 as a correct record. All agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Do members have any interest to declare? I'll take that as a no. Okay. Where did my book go? Okay. Now for my announcements. Just bear with me. Sorry, different eyes. Okay. Right, well, I have been quite a busy mayor up until, to the end of December. From my mayor making in May, I did 110 events, and I did several other unofficial ones as well. That was 2023. There were 22 engagements in December, plus a few others again that sort of snuck in. And at the moment, I've got 3 this year. The engagements I did, I'm not going to go through every single one, but I'll give you a flavour of how November, December panned out. I did presentations, which is always my favourite part. I did that to Falston School for their end of years awards, and Challenger Troop, which is obviously one of my charities, and that really was fantastic. I was able to give some of the kids corporal stripes and all sorts, so that was really lovely. Xmas lights, lots of Christmas light switching. I seem to have a sort of not a very powerful finger or bell ringing hand though, because 2 lots didn't light up as I pressed the button and rang the bell. So they did tease me about that quite a bit. There were lots of lunches with local groups, MS Wales, Stroke Association, and I opened a couple of village food festival and a fete in my own village, Tunstall. The Tunstall Tree Festival as well, so that was really lovely to be able to do stuff in my own village. Lots of Christmas parties, as you can well imagine. One was with Oasis Academy at their dementia group. There was a celebratory party for the community radio at Sheppey FM. And then lots of our local care homes. I won't name them individually, but there was one in particular that sits in the mind of my mind forever. It was my last event at Christmas, and this care home had this lovely drag artist entertaining the residents. Apparently he'd been there for like 5 or 6 years, so he even knew the residents. It was hysterical. I had someone witness it who's sitting behind me. My husband wasn't there. And you had the mayor singing very badly, Mamma Mia, and I Think I Love You, and doing upside down your head and all sorts of things at the event. So, yes, it was. I was quite a proactive mayor at that one, so it did raise a few smiles. Carol services were lovely, Salvation Army, Holy Trinity, and it was just a really nice time. It was very, very busy, but it was a lovely time, really nice. A couple of out of boroughs went and did a lovely Nepalese night, raising money for the Mayor of Medway, for her charities, and we met the chap at the Gurkha at Climbed Everest with amputee, the double amputee. And that was really, he did a talk, and I got to sit next to him, and he was a really lovely guy and learnt lots about his life and his family. Right, we have fundraisers as well. We had a quiz night in our local microbrewery pub in the High Street, and they raised £80 for me. They are repeating that on Valentine's night, so members, if any of you can come, it would be great if you could join us. It's on the 14th of February at 7 o'clock, and it's all for my charities, so if any of you could join, that would be fantastic. I had my own fundraiser, which was brilliant, at the Forge Wartime House. We made £500, and it was a fantastic evening. The star attraction, yet again, was Hazel the Fox. So she stole the show right at the end. So that was a really successful event, and I'm in the process of planning a future fundraiser, and I know there's other ones in the pipeline as well. Okay, the other lovely thing I want to announce is that I've now actually got a cadet. She's come from Challenger Troop, which is obviously one of my charities, and she's joining me since December on events. Lovely girl, and it's been a real pleasure to have her coming with me and sharing some of the events in the care homes. So that's a really nice thing. It just happened. I can't even tell you how it happened, but we got this lovely girl that's going to come with me. The last announcement is one that's going to be launched tomorrow, Mayor's Civic Awards. We're launching this year's announcement for nominations. So again, if you know anybody in your communities that you feel really should be nominated, please put them forward. And at the same point, we're going to do the judging in April. So please, in your groups, think about who wants to actually be on the judging panel. So I'd like one person from each group to be on the judging panel with me. So I think I have covered everything. Yep. Yeah, that's lovely. Okay. Oh, sorry. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had hoped to catch you beforehand on a more mundane note and ask that you announce Angela's black mesh backrest has walked.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that helps with these chairs. So if anyone sees it, I am the owner. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harrison. Okay, right, item 6, questions from the public. There are no questions submitted by the public tonight, so we can move on to item 7, agenda item 7, which is questions submitted by the members. 6 questions have been submitted and received from members. 2 have since been withdrawn. Rightio. So, I'm going to ask each member to ask their question in turn, and then invite the chair of the relevant service committee to respond. And then I will ask the member if they have a supplementary question. If so, again, invite the chair of the relevant service committee to respond. Please try to ensure that supplementary questions are actually questions rather than statements, and that they are related to the subject matter of the original questions. So I have question 1, which is Councillor Lloyd Bowen. And you're asking Councillor... is it myself? Because Councillor Jays is up there.
He's asking Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, it would be Councillor Baldock, but he's not here, so I'll read the answer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the question was, at the Planning Committee on the 12th of October, I commented regarding legal services attendance at Planning Committee meetings. I note that legal services are not present this evening, is what I said. I'm trying to understand why that is. Was that decision made by this committee, and what the rationale was behind this? The chairman said he would send me a formal position statement and share that to the other Planning Committee members. I have yet to receive the response, so I ask again. Did the Planning Committee agree not to have legal services at all Planning Committee meetings, and what rationale was presented to inform that decision? This is after several meetings of the Planning Committee have taken place without legal services or advice being available if required. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Bowen. So in the absence of Councillor Baldock, I'm going to read the response. Thank you for your question. It is standard and best practice for an organisation to make sure that it is using its resources effectively, and Swale Borough Council is no different. It is not the case that the legal no longer attend Planning Committee, but that representatives attend when gender items may specifically benefit from their input. In advance of each committee meeting, planning and legal officers share with me as chair their view as to whether legal input may be of benefit, and together we agree which, if any, terms merit legal attendance. When legal do attend, it is now for select items on the agenda and not necessarily the whole meeting, with the underpinning rationale of making good use of valuable officer time. Councillor Bowen, do you have a supplementary?
I do. Constitutionally, can the chairman make that decision, or should it have gone to the Planning Committee members to decide whether legal services should or should not attend? I'm fully happy for a written response if need be.
Yeah. That we are going to do a written response to that, Councillor Bowen. Okay. Question 2 and 3 were withdrawn. So question 4 is from Councillor Ashley Shell to Councillor Richard Leaving. So is anyone speaking on his behalf? No? He's going to do it remote.
No, you have to do it.
All right, okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the last year or so, the government have committed some funding to biodiversity and the natural restoration, but this funding's come as a one-off funding. And we'd like the Chair of Environment to write to government to ask for this funding to be stretched out to 2030 so that we've got the best possible way to support our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schnell. Okay, the response I'm going to read is, thank you, Councillor Schnell, for the Environment Committee discussed this issue late last year and has identified areas in which bolster our wide-ranging strategies and policies relating to biodiversity and ecological emergency. In my position as chair of the committee, I would be happy to write to government to highlight the work we are planning, to stress our inability to commit to long-term investment at a time when local government funding remains in a state of uncertainty, and also to request specific funding streams that can be used by authorities for this purpose.
Point of order, Chair. It's just that Councillor Lehman is online and maybe he could have given the answer, and if there's a supplementary, can he answer the supplementary? Thank you.
Councillor Gould was also online and I've been told to read the... Do you want to answer?
No, Councillor Gould is here. Councillor
Jay, sorry.
was the deputy. The deputy was on, but he decided it'd be better to be answered in the meeting rather than do a written answer to the question. So,
Right.
It's within your discretion if you'd like, Councillor Leaving, to take something else.
Yeah, I was just about to, yeah. Have you a supplementary, Councillor Steele?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
That's all right then. That helps.
point of order, Madam Mayor. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Sorry.
A point of order was raised, but don't think we've actually had the answer given to that point of order. It was.
It's actually the Mayor's discretion. I could have asked Councillor Lehman to speak if he wanted to. So, but there wasn't a supplementary, so yeah, sorry, I should have answered. Question 5 is Councillor Hayden Braun to Councillor Tim Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following yet another government funding settlement which leaves councils adrift across the country and which once more lasts just 1 year, will the leader write to Swales MPs with the support of all service committee chairs, asking them to call for multi-year funding in the future settlements to provide clarity and allow councils to properly plan ahead?
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Braun. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Braun, for your question. It is once again disappointing that we have a 1-year settlement, as a provisional local government settlement falls well short of stemming the acute financial pressures resulting from the spending squeeze since 2015, coupled with rapid growth in demand for statutory services such as homelessness and the prolonged period of steep costs and inflation. The short-term nature of funding settlement for district councils makes future budget planning incredibly difficult, and this is heightened by the uncertainty of the reset of the localisation of business rates, which forms a significant element of our funding. The district councils networks have lobbied on our behalf, and members of the network were encouraged to write to our MPs to make representations to the Secretary of State on the inadequacy of the provisional statement, to inform the consultation on the provisional settlement. In my capacity as leader, I have written to both our MPs to call for an increase in our core spending power to be achieved by either additional grant funding or an increase in the council referendum limit, greater freedoms and flexibilities around centrally set fees and charges such as planning applications and licensing, additional targeted support for immediate homelessness pressures, and additional funding for long-term solutions to the impact of the steep increase in the internal drainage board levies.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Braun, do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Question 6 is from Councillor Anne Kavanagh to Councillor Tim Gibson. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. £8.74 million was the amount awarded to Swale by government in their funding settlement for 2015 to 16. By 2023 to 24, this had been cut in real terms by 45.4% to £4.77 million. The settlement from government in December, given inflation over the previous year, barely stays steady. Does the leader agree that it's time for government to finally develop fair funding for councils?
Councillor Gibson, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The fair funding review for local authorities is long overdue and is desperately needed to enable councils to prepare meaningful financial plans beyond the funding settlement period. The short-term nature of the current funding settlement means that the future financial planning position is based on estimated assumptions beyond the next financial year. The scale of the uncertainty is high for district councils, as many of the headline announcements are for councils that have a social care responsibility. Progression on the development of fair funding would certainly be most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Kavanagh, have you a supplementary?
No supplementary, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. So that brings us to the end of questions. So we move on to agenda item 8, which is our leader's statement. I will ask the leader to read his statement, and then we'll ask leaders of the opposition groups to respond in the usual way. Following that, I will invite other members to respond to the leader's statement. Members invited to speak will have 3 minutes. This item has an overall time limit of 30 minutes to ensure broad fairness. I will try to invite responses from members of the administration and opposition groups in roughly equal numbers. This may mean that I deviate from the order in which members have indicated a wish to speak. Can I please remind all members that the responses must be to the issues raised in the leader's statement. So I now invite Councillor Gibson to give his verbal statement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the exercise. As late as it may be, it's the first time that we've all formally met this year, so could I wish every one of you a happy new year, one that brings better things for us all and the residents that we serve. Could I also take this opportunity, on behalf of us all, to welcome Charles Gibson, the new member for Abbey Ward. Welcome, Charles, and congratulations on having such an excellent surname. I'd also like to send our good wishes to Councillor Mike Henderson, who hasn't been particularly well of late. We're currently viewing the outcomes of a number of recent consultations at a time when, like most local authorities, we're facing unprecedented challenges with pressures on budgets, and accordingly our own aspirations will need to be carefully balanced, considering the need for efficiency savings and ensuring fiscal stability as a priority. As a council, we do of course remain committed to seeking and accessing external opportunities for funding and partnership working to support us in delivering improvements in our borough and the services that we provide. With the apparent endless narrative that the cost of living crisis is continuing far longer than anyone would want it to, in conjunction with Swale CVS and Faversham Community Networking Group, we've organised more of our One Swale roadshows to assist residents affected, providing signposting, help and support. The roadshows are partly funded by the UK Government's Household Support Fund and have become a popular, safe space for residents to receive unbiased, non-judgmental, confidential, free advice and support. This month's theme has been debt, financial support and benefits. However, the themes are not singly or mutually exclusive, and the guidance and advice on other issues is of course still available. To date, roadshows have been hosted in Sheerness, Faversham, Laysdown and Kemsley, and they will continue until the end of March, allowing for more targeted help to reach the people who are in most need of it. I've spent a considerable time lobbying for funding improvements for Swale, and in particular I've been pushing for funding increases in areas that have the greatest impacts on both our budgets and our residents. Homelessness and temporary accommodation has been a particular area of focus. In Swale, we've seen a significant increase in the number of households in temporary accommodation, with an 84% increase in 2019. We have the highest level of TA amongst Kent districts. The wider level of concern was demonstrated at a recent District Councils Network Summit that I attended on behalf of Swale, when 158 councils were represented, and 86% of DCN member councils reported a significant increase in use of temporary accommodation. The increase in expenditure is a critical risk to the financial stability of many local authorities, ourselves included, and the pressure is particularly acute for district councils because housing costs a far bigger proportion of our overall expenditure. We and our partner organisations have had success in recent years in moving the whole local system towards preventing homelessness rather than just dealing with the consequences. But if funding is not addressed, there is a real danger of a knock-on impact for many of our other partners. Following the summit, I was invited to attend a Westminster event with a smaller group of leaders of all political colours from across the country, where MPs were lobbied on the issue and colleagues spoke passionately about the impact it was having in their districts and the urgent need for change. We do, of course, eagerly await the outcomes of our concerted efforts. And it cannot be denied that we're facing the perfect storm: inadequate funding, loss of private sector landlords due to interest rate rises, maintenance requirements and changes to tax rules. There is also, of course, the issue where initial buy-to-let landlords are approaching retirement age and selling as property investment supports their pension provision. In Swale, like many areas, private rented sector is simply unaffordable to many, and landlords are preferring working tenants with access to a guarantor and a clear credit file. Another key issue I've been actively involved in is lobbying for a fairer way of funding internal drainage boards. And I'll be up in Westminster again in early February for a special interest group cross-party meeting with ministers and MPs to raise our concerns. As we've seen recently, incidents of heavy rainfall, flash flooding and coastal flooding have and are likely to increase due to climate change. The need for pumping stations and their operations will always remain a vital tool to reduce flooding impact for properties and agricultural land. And we can't overstate the value of the work that our drainage board does. However, just like households, internal drainage boards have been affected by utility costs, increase in terms of fuel and electricity. These challenges for internal drainage boards are likely to become continuous and pushing up our operational costs, resulting in higher levels to councils, including, of course, our own. Prior to 13-14, partial funding was provided by the government's revenue support grant. However, over time the grant has been reduced, and the councils with IDBs have funded the levy and annual increases through the money that they've received through council tax, which of course is capped. This means that councils with IDBs are therefore unable to generate the additional funds needed to meet the levy demands. The current funding approach is adversely affecting councils who are struggling to afford to pay the high levy demands and fund their statutory services. In many cases, council tax increases will, for a number of councils, see the majority go simply to the IDBs. Councils like us are disproportionately impacted simply because we are in primary flooding areas and we are lobbying for a fundamental change in approach to funding from government. Moving on, we're back in the Making Things Right campaign, set up to help people facing issues with their social housing. We will make sure that people know how to complain, understand their rights and feel empowered in the knowledge that their complaints will be heard. The campaign aims to make sure people living in social housing know that their landlord is responsible for fixing issues such as mould and damp, leaks, broken locks, poor insulation and other general repairs. Following the tragic death of 2-year-old Awa Bishak, it became more important than ever to hold landlords to account when they've clearly failed their tenants. The Social Housing Act is now law, and Awab's law, which was born out of his sad death in December 2020, remains a firm reminder of the importance for all tenants to have the right to live in safe and decent homes while being treated with fairness, dignity and respect. Given that 10% of social homes failed to meet the Decent Homes standard last year, this is a serious wake-up call for landlords. Whilst there's a requirement to investigate hazards within 14 days, start fixing within a further 7 days and make emergency repairs within 24 hours, it would be so much better if the incidences didn't occur in the first place. And finally, a reminder. Our new waste contract commences on the 24th of March, when your bin may be collected by Wheelie Wonka, Trash Gordon or even Binny the Pooh. And we'll be providing information on the transition from old to new for residents and members. Thank you, members. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Bowen, would you like to give your response to the statement, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I thank the leader for his statement and would like to share his belated New Year wishes. I hope this year brings, although it appears unlikely, prosperity and definite positive developments for all, specifically for the residents we are committed to serving. I also extend a warm welcome to Charles Gibson, Councillor Gibson, the new member for Abbey Ward, and convey our best wishes to Councillor Henderson and hope to see him back in the chamber soon. As we convene here today, my group acknowledge the challenges that lie ahead for Swale Borough Council. The pressures on budgets are palpable, and we as representatives must be mindful with the harsh reality, as say, of the need for efficiency savings and fiscal stability. It is our duty to navigate through these challenges whilst remaining committed to delivering for our residents and the services we provide, and not see our residents as a cash cow for the council. Times are hard for everyone, although certainly harder for some than others. Reminds me of Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. But we are all in a cost of living crisis, and some are affected by it more than others. We need to do whatever we can to help our residents cover their living costs. People often save for a rainy day. We are currently in a rainy season, it seems. But has the administration kept this thought in mind since 2019, or spent on items that in hindsight the administration would now question? I'm sure we have differing opinions on that. I commend the efforts undertaken in collaboration with Swale CVA and Faversham Community Networking Group to address the ongoing cost of living crisis through the One Swale roadshows, supported by the Conservative Government's Household Support Fund. I recognise the work they do and services they provide for residents in need. However, as we strive to enhance the well-being of our residents, it is crucial that we are also addressing pressing issues that impact our community on a deeper level. The alarming increase in homelessness and temporary accommodation demands immediate action. The statistics are stark, as stated by the leader, an 84% increase since 2019, and Swale having the highest level of temporary accommodation among Kent districts is not something to be proud of, and we must do what we can to address this, along with our partners. The statements made by the administration on their intentions regarding temporary accommodation and rainbow homes, etc., since taking over the administration of the council, do not seem to be having the effect intended. A challenge that presents itself to the administration as to what else can we do to help. Maybe the statement in the corporate plan, ensuring everyone has access to a decent home, is a clear ambition of the council. Is literally that, an ambition that you know you are highly unlikely to achieve based on performance since 2019. But my group will, as always, support endeavours that we think will help reduce or tackle this issue, and I do not apologise, but we will raise it when we do not think the course set is the correct one. I welcome any fairer way of funding internal drainage boards. I struggle to understand how people, even now, not necessarily in this chamber, do not see that climate change is a real thing and is causing more and more problems. I saw in the news today that they are now thinking even of also naming heat waves to help raise public awareness of the dangers of heat. 2023-24 winter is likely to see the highest number of named storms ever. I think we're tied first at the moment, and we've still got weeks left of the season. Climate change-induced incidents of heavy rainfall, flash flooding, coastal flooding necessitate the vital work of our drainage board, and I wish you the best of luck with that. Finally, and I understand the leader not wanting to mention it, but I'm pleased that the hokey-cokey shaking it all about shenanigans of we're in, we're out, and we're back in the coalition again by members of this administration before Christmas appear to have been resolved. But the image that presented to our residents have reflected badly on this council. As one person commented on Kent Online, and I quote, "The question is, where does this mean Swale goes for its residents? As at the moment, all of the above groups, except Conservatives, just seem intent on fighting each other rather than progressing the borough. Hopefully this has been resolved. Time will tell. Our residents depend on our collective efforts to secure their well-being and the prosperity of our borough. Let us work to navigate these challenges and advocate for the necessary changes to ensure a brighter future for Swale. 2024 is going to be a very challenging and interesting year for us all." Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Martin, would you like to do your response, please? Thank you.
Please excuse the ring rust on this one. I'd like to thank the leader, first of all, for the advance copy of the statement. That was very useful. Thank you for the kind words for welcoming Councillor Gibson. It is good to have somebody by my side tonight. In terms of Councillor Henderson, I know he is doing better and is looking forward. He's chomping at the bit to get back in here. It took all our powers of persuasion that actually you're best resting still, Councillor Henderson, not coming tonight. So I will pass on your well wishes there. In terms of this statement, it is very much a case that we all know how much of a struggle it is financially for councils at the moment. All councils across the board are struggling. And we can't forget that it is our services are most dependent for those that are most vulnerable in society. Those are our heaviest users. And those are the ones that are impacted most when we have to make cuts. Those are the ones that are affected most when any government makes cuts. We have to remember those people when we're making our decisions when we come to budget night. Cuts do have consequences. Let us not also forget that the New Statesman now has an interactive tracker for councils in financial distress. How sad is that? We have to have an interactive tracker from the press of the councils in distress. I certainly welcome the road shows that have been going around the borough. They are most welcome and have certainly, from the residents that I have spoken to, proved helpful. In terms of temporary accommodation costs and whatnot, no surprise that I saved a lot of time for this one. We have to look at this holistically. There are certain boroughs and districts in this county that might pad their figures a little bit by having temporary accommodation separate from discretionary accommodation. Discretionary accommodation licences for those who are not deemed to be in urgent priority need, as one borough that may or may not be in the Mid-Kent Partnership uses. That doesn't count towards their temporary accommodation stats. So you're not comparing apples with apples, you're comparing apples and oranges here on that front. In terms of the expense, yes, of course it's gone up because there isn't enough of it. We're all fighting over the same stuff. And why are we all fighting over the same stuff? It's because there's not been enough new social and affordable rent housing built. Now, part of that could be down to planning and lack of local plans and whatever, you can argue that. Or you could argue that it's down to the increased costs. Realistically, we've got the big stick here for social housing and social landlords in terms of the Making Things Right campaign, but where's been the support? Where's been the funding for new social housing? Where's been the assistance? Social landlords are debt funded. If you have 10,000 houses as a social landlord, I guarantee you next year you're paying over £1 million a month in interest repayments alone. That's before you think about doing any repairs work or doing any new housing development for new social housing to help get us out of the situation with temporary accommodation. So we've got to look at that holistically. We need that funding to come through from central government for our social landlords too. We must also remember that it's not just social landlords that have a problem. It is private landlords too. Councillor Perkin was telling me the other day of a case she has been supporting where the individual doesn't want to come to us and complain about the damp and mould in her private rented accommodation, because if she does, her landlord might issue that Section 21 notice. You know, that Section 21 we were told for the last 4 years was going to be removed and still hasn't been. They'll just get me out. They'll get someone else in. They'll paint over the mould. Someone else will rent it. Tough luck. And they'll increase how much they're charging for it. So we have to make sure that there is parity there. We also need to be discussing the differences between what's been told by the Ombudsman versus what's told by the social housing regulator. The Ombudsman says that you cannot tell a tenant or an occupant of a dwelling that their lifestyle choices might have an impact on the damp and mould in their home. The social housing regulator says that we have to have grown-up adult conversations about the fact that our lifestyles can impact upon the damp and mould and condensation in our homes. Which one do our social housing providers listen to? The one that's going to fine them and tell them that they've got to pay the compensation, or the one that regulates them? Very tricky situation for them too. We have to look at also what's happening with that 10%. In most cases, that's going to be sold off when it's vacant. It'll be put to auction because it's not economical to bring it up to the right standards because there hasn't been the investment. We're fairly lucky in this borough in some respects in that we did the stock transfer in the early 90s. For boroughs that did it later on, they hadn't had investment for 30, 40 years in their stock. At least we had some investment over that 20-year period with Amicus Horizon, Swale Housing, Optivo.
Time, councillor.
Thank you kindly. So I will just wind up with thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing Billy Wonka and Bruce Springsteen, Bruce Springclean, out in Faversham very soon.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. I've got apologies from Councillor Lehman. He's online, but he's not feeling well enough to respond this evening. So we'll move on to any members that want to comment, please. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 2 points related to what the leader said. One, on the lobbying on the temporary housing costs. Do you think that the lobbying is making any difference whatsoever, in particular with the summit with the MPs most recently? The bottom line is, if you qualify as being homeless, we have to find you somewhere to live. We can't say, oh no, we've spent the budget, love, go and sleep on a park bench. We've just got to keep finding the money and something else has to go. It isn't a choice. Councillor Bowen said actions have consequences. Most recently in that LGIU Daily News, which I do actually read, I think it might be Dudley, but don't quote me, the leader said, yeah, with hindsight, years of low council tax increases was the wrong thing to do because we are now suffering. And that is something which we've said many, many times over the years at Swale, that the low council taxes that you kept low, artificially low, will have a consequence in the future, and they have done so. On the Awab's Law social housing tenants leader, I did do a quote for the media officer on that. Great news, but aren't there more private lets in this country than social lets? And that law should apply equally to them. Don't keep I know, everybody's entitled to a decent home, but you're picking on the social ones. Let's keep bashing the social landlords, and the mates, the private landlords, will let them get away with blue murder. Well, the law should apply equally. If you're in a infested accommodation full of damp and mould, then the landlord should deal with it. It shouldn't be, oh, you're a social landlord, so we're going to require you to deal with it. But you're a private landlord, you can get away with blue murder, mate. It should be equal laws for everybody. As far as the temporary accommodation is concerned, we will be taking an update report to the next Housing and Health Committee on where we are. The staff are, I'd say, working themselves into the ground, but they are doing their absolute best to do what they can to provide accommodation. You know, because you agreed it, that we've got the money put aside and we have been buying temporary accommodation where we can, and we will get an update on that as to how many and where and all the rest of it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Worcester?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to highlight the roadshows that Swale have been running. I attended Sheerness's roadshow because I believe as a councillor it's incumbent on my residents that I do not just put my hand up and vote for something, that I actually attend and make sure that, for instance, the events that we put on, that we spend public money on, are actually doing what they should do. And for the most part, they are excellent, and full credit to those officers that have put really hard work into reaching out to community groups and people who can support. I think some of them are even social prescribers. Absolutely excellent. However, it was noticed that on the day of the Sheerness roadshow that we had no officers present on the day, and that I think needs to be highlighted higher up, because we only have one pot of money with regards to how it is spent, and being poorly provided for by central government has these knock-on effects, and it has these real knock-on effects for residents. So on that day, there was nobody there really to facilitate residents, people in real need, joining up with those organisations. Confident ones, yes, but we're not really after the confident ones. We're after the people that poke their heads in, put their head above the parapet, those people who formerly were in quite a comfortable position, they're just about managing, the people that CAB have highlighted on numerous occasions over the last year and a half that will be and will continue to struggle. Those are the people we need to facilitate into help and support. And obviously that has to be highlighted again through the fact that KCC have looked at the budget for community wardens. Community warden was present on the day, and we have to face that realistic possibility now that even that support that we rely on so heavily on Sheppey is about to be taken away through no fault of their own, through poor funding decisions by central Conservative government that has real knock-on effects for our residents on a day-to-day basis that was quite acutely shown during that roadshow. So well done, Swale, and I'm ever so sorry that these cuts are affecting residents in these ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester. Councillor Bonnet, please.
Oh, thank you. Newfangled gadget to get to grips with. The leader talked about the budget issues and the one-year settlement. We know that budgets are extremely tight, and we are facing, looking down a very long, narrow barrel of financial decisions in February as to where we go with our budget. But what does the leader think about the latest grand idea to sell off the family silver to fund council revenue budgets? What happens when the money runs out? This flies in the face of the usual thinking and accounting practices, not just our local ones, not just our national accounting policies, but those we advise of our international partners. So, selling the family assets at possibly the worst time in the market. Could he comment, please?
Thank you, Councillor Bonnet. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got two things, actually. One, I would like to ask. There is, I understand, legislation in place with regard to properties that are in the private sector, private landlords. And it just means, frankly, that dodgy people, would you agree that dodgy people ought to be prosecuted, for a start? That's one thing. The other thing, I don't mind if it comes on a blue paper, but I would like to know the total amount of money, if possible, that we are paying on this temporary accommodation. So you could, if someone could give me a blue paper on it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Is there any other councillors that want to speak? No? So I'll take back to Councillor Gibbons to answer the...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there's a fair old cross-section there. I think what has come across loud and clear this evening is that as a council, we all stand together for the things that are important to us and to our residents. I've heard that from Councillor Bowen, I've heard it from Councillor Martin, you've heard it from me, and I'm sure if Councillor Lehman was able to talk, you'd have probably heard it from him too. But there we are. Efficiency savings, fiscal stability, being a Yorkshireman, it's dear to my heart, and it will come as no surprise. That is the one drum that I relentlessly bang and probably absolutely drive people around the bend with. And it is important because we haven't got fiscal stability. We might as well not be here. In fact, we won't be here. And there's part of me that says, quite often, do the government really want us here? Do they want local councils? Because the way things are going, I don't think they're going to exist very much longer. Ambition, I don't think it's bad to have ambition. If you aim low, you shoot yourself in the foot. So I tend to also aim high and go for whatever we can. We are stronger together. That goes without a shadow of a doubt. Councils are struggling. We're not right across the country. And, you know, when I turn up at these meetings with MPs, doing the lobbying and so on, it's not a coalition council. It's not a Labour council. It's not a Liberal Democrat council. It's not a Conservative. It's the lot, and I mean the lot, right across the piece. So everybody across the country is suffering. Yes, there's a little bit of a flippant comment there about things that may have happened before Christmas, but of course, as Mr Sunak and co are pretty good at telling us, well, that's in the past now. It's gone, it's history. And I can assure you that it is. And throughout all of that time, there was not one member from any of the parties in this coalition that didn't still represent their ward, didn't represent their views, and so on. So, in fact, he had very, very little impact on what we were trying to achieve. So things have just progressed and pushed on, you'll be pleased to know. Social housing. Councillor Martin, you're right, and I've missed your input in the chamber on this particular subject. I know how passionate you are about it, and how important it is to us all. And it is literally incumbent on central government to make sure that they are supporting us in the way that they should to achieve it. I've had Councillor Harrison saying, you know, is the lobbying making any difference? Do you know what? I haven't got much hair left.
Fine, Councillor.
I've not only got much hair left, I've got no time left either, apparently. But the point being, you do often wonder if you are making that difference. So, on that note, I better sit down before Madam Mayor gets that thing and beats me with it.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. I've got that. I haven't used it yet, actually. I've got to have one chance at using it. Okay, we're going to come on now to agenda item 9, which is the allocation of committee seats and committee appointments. And I invite Councillor Gibson to introduce the report and propose the recommendations, please.
I have said earlier there's 2 Gibsons in the chamber, but there's only ever seems to be one that's standing up this evening. So there we go. Perhaps in the fullness of time, Charles. Okay, so this particular agenda item is to establish the committees for the council for the municipal year 23-24. You think, well, perhaps that's a little bit late, but that's arisen out of no less than the election of Charles. So we've had to do some adjustments, and of course, it is what it is. The report sets out the changes to the committee membership following a recent by-election in Abbey Ward, and a political balance effectively remains unchanged. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. I'd like to invite Councillor Bowen to second the motion, this item, and ask you whether you wish to speak. Or
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
reserve your right.
I'm happy to second this motion, paper or recommend item. I've lost my train of words as well. And I'll speak now because it's one of those things. It is what it is. Let's move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. I will open this up to the members now. Does anybody want to speak? Councillor the other Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought I'd better give my fellow Councillor Gibson a break and take a stand for a moment, just to say a huge thank you for the warm welcome I've received across the board and at all of the committees I've attended and subbed on so far. It's been a great pleasure, and I'm very pleased to be getting stuck in, so thank you all very much for that. And to repeat a plea that I know will be repetitive from our group, that we make all of our working groups and committees as accessible as possible in time frame. It is excellent that we are an evening council and available to working residents, but not all of our working groups are, and that presents a real challenge to working councillors, but also to working residents who might be interested and might be able to contribute. So if we could continue to push on making sure our working groups are in the evening, that would be a huge help to all of us. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Whiting.
Push that now, I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a clarification, if I can. On the top of page 22, under 4.2, it talks about the areas committees agreeing spending. I wasn't aware that the area committees had any budget to agree to spend, and I just, some clarification on those wording, please. We'll be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Is there anybody else? Hmm? Yeah. Would you like to respond now, Councillor Gibson?
I wouldn't like to, but if you want me to.
I don't know, these cheeky leaders.
Sorry, Councillor White, I thought I'd better speak before we do. You're absolutely right. They don't have any funding, but within the context, it's there so that if we do in future, that's part and parcel of it. So you're quite right. But thank you very much. Is that what it said?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ben. I'm used to saying Ben Martin, the other one, wasn't it? Councillor Martin, would you like to speak on this?
I'll make it really brief and go, I'd like to move to the vote at this point, to be honest. I think it's well there and we just get on with it.
Okay, so we'll move to the vote then. All those in favour of the recommendations, please raise your hands. The vote is unanimous. Thank you, members. Switched off. I'm getting used to these words. The next item is item 10, Climate and Ecological Emergency Annual Report. Now, Councillor Lehman does actually want to speak on this and introduce the item, so I invite him to speak, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Bear with me a second. Yeah. On 26th of June 2019, this council voted unanimously to declare a climate and ecological emergency. And in the wake of that declaration, we set ourselves some of the most ambitious and challenging targets of any local authority in the UK to achieve net zero on carbon for the council's activities by 2025 and net zero across the borough by 2030. This is the 5th annual report since 2019, and it covers the activities undertaken towards achieving our targets during 2023. It's very positive to be able to report the huge amount of progress made over the year, despite the pressures on the council from the ongoing effects of the pandemic, which I'm personally currently suffering from as well, and a host of other economic pressures. However, we are coming to the end of a cycle and need to accept that we will not be able to fully meet our ambitious targets and that work is needed to review and reprioritise our actions. We will be aiming to keep up the momentum, but we also have to accept that we are to a large extent reliant on external forces to be able to do so. Moving on to the report itself, I'll just pick out a few of the items to highlight. We have a cross-party steering group of councillors and officers which meet regularly to progress actions, and that includes coverage of all service areas across the council. And I'm sure that anyone who's attended the steering group will attest to how uplifting it is to hear about all the positive actions being taken right across our council. With regard to our buildings, the refurbishment of the second floor of Swale House is now complete, and Masters House has been fully refurbished and successfully let to a charitable enterprise supporting young people looking to start up businesses. Our grounds maintenance contract has seen new electric vehicles and power tools used for the first time, and our new waste and street cleansing contract will reduce carbon emissions by rerouting rounds to reduce fuel use by between 10 and 15%, using cleaner, more fuel-efficient vehicles with electric lift mechanisms for the bins. Our street sweeping vehicles will also be switched to electric. The Improvement and Resilience Fund has enabled projects including LED lighting, tree planting, 2 car club schemes, EV charging points and air quality measures. We are working with KCC to explore in more detail measures to increase active travel, promote wider adoption of electric vehicle through measures like on-street charging, and improve the air quality across the borough. The Planning Committee has successfully requested more renewable energy and energy efficiency measures be included in new developments. We have planted 295 standard trees this year and 14,000 whips. Kent Wildlife Trust approached Swale Borough Council last year to be a local authority partner in their 3 Seas project, which will restore salt marshes along the Swale. We are also working with Peel Ports on a project to make beneficial use of dredging sediments. Swale is the only second-tier authority in Kent with an active travel coordinator. A lot of work has been undertaken to promote active travel, such as the local walking and cycling infrastructure projects, Active Travel Biz to KCC, with funding for the Faversham Crosstown Path, the Quiet Ways bid, and Sheppey Light Greenway project. In total, these projects were awarded funding in excess of £1.1 million. I hope that you'll all take the time to read through the report in full, as the items I've just listed are the tip of the icebergs we need to be trying to save. So that was 2023. Turning our attention to 2024 and beyond, we now need to revisit our carbon footprint to establish where we are and how we proceed, setting new actions to make sure we maintain momentum. This will include looking at whether we offset or retarget. The financial situation facing our local authorities and the cost of living crisis has limited our options, and we need to be able to determine what is feasible. To that end, we've obtained a quote from the Carbon Trust, who did our original footprinting work, to undertake the recalculation. This will not only pick up the progress we've made so far, but will also ensure that our officers are able to undertake any future analysis carbon footprinting work in-house. The Environment Committee on the 17th of January approved the reallocation of unspent environment and resilience funding that was set aside for the climate and ecological emergency, and using the findings from this review, we will revisit our action plan and take a revised version through the committee process for adoption. And in closing, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all of the officers who've worked so hard across the council in this area over the last few years, and in particular to Janet Hill and Sam Brookfield, who did the bulk of the work in putting together the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I will reiterate your thanks to the officers on this. They've worked so hard. Can I now ask Councillor Dolly Worcester, the Vice Chair, to second the motion? And do you wish to speak or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right at the moment. I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester. Councillor Gibson, would you like to speak on this, please? Report, I meant to speak on the report. I called a motion.
Thank you. I was just waiting for Charles to give way to me, that was all. So I'll start by saying, yes, it is disappointing that we're not going to meet our targets for net zero. But let's be honest, the targets that we set were far in excess of any other local authority. We have been held up, not locally or regionally, but actually nationally and internationally, when I remember Councillor Valentine was still with us, and we got accolades in Europe for how we were moving forward with our green environmental agenda. And I'll be perfectly honest, it's been a big learning curve for me, but it's been great working alongside such committed people to ensure that our environment is better for those that are with us now, those that will come in future, and those in many years beyond. And there's some really good news stories there. We've made some massive strides. We've talked about EVs, we've talked about chargers, we've talked about car club schemes, trees and whips. Swale House, magnificent difference. I mean, it really, really is incredible, the difference it made there. Masters House, again, what's been seen and held up as a really, really fantastic venture, and also in terms of environmental stuff that we've done there, absolutely outstanding. Again, what I would say is we still need the government to support us, and it always seems to go back to that, but unfortunately that is the way it is. And when we get a government that says, right, petrol cars will be no more, and suddenly we find that actually, you know, we've changed our minds on that now, so we'll push that back another umpty dozen years. So what happens is that does impact on what we're trying to achieve here. So what I would say is I'm really enthused by it. It's an excellent report. I'm pleased that it's one that we do have coming here annually. And I think it was an opposition member at the time that asked for that to happen. And I just congratulate Councillor Lehman, as it is now, and Councillor Worcester, and the committee for the excellent work that they're doing, and the officers supporting you in getting where we need to be. We'll just strive for better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak on this, please? I've missed. Oh, sorry, I've gone. It's actually in the wrong order on here. You're not even in the. Yeah. So, sorry about that.
That's all right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you also Councillor Lehman for presenting this report. I think to summarise this report in one sentence would be, eyes are bigger than our belly. Whilst progress has been made in quite a few areas, what we hope to achieve, we aren't. And I don't see a revised date in this report of when we will achieve it. The aspiration back in 2019 of net zero by 2025 isn't going to happen, which, in my opinion, is the #1 priority this council could achieve in this area. What are the new dates? Or are we leaving it as we will get to it when we get to it situation? I do genuinely welcome a lot in this report and recognise the intentions behind it, which I do applaud. However, the report suggests that not only are the amounts we recycle going down, albeit not a huge percentage amount I appreciate according to figure 9, from a high during the last year of the Conservative administration to the lowest level since the coalition took charge. Begs the question, can the council do more to educate and move this figure in the opposite direction? Incidentally, in the report on page 9 of 52, I think the figure references are wrong. Under household waste, it refers to figure 8, which is greenhouse emissions. The car share schemes in Faversham and Sittingbourne are a great idea and seem to be performing well. But this relates to the people within the 2 town centres. Swale is a lot bigger than that. What about the people in the rural communities, Tenham, Linstead, Newington, Iwade, for example? It would be lovely to have this facility to offer them. So far, we've also totally neglected residents on the island. I hope this can change soon. The report also notes that all new developments are encouraged to achieve a 50% saving in carbon emissions over 2013 building regulations, 90% more than the current regs. The emerging local plan will bring this down to net zero emissions by 2030. I sincerely hope this can be achieved with the developers, but first of all, we need a local plan, or a new local plan. Swale House. I urge that a proper review is undertaken regarding this old and arguably not fit for purpose asset, and rather than plough money into it, look at options that will help us be a greener, cleaner council and potentially save residents money longer term. I do not recall that back in 2019 it was an ambition to relocate all the staff to 1 floor. This is due to the shift in the ways of working, but not really considered as part of greening this council. It could be argued that actually this move to working from home may have increased the council's environmental impact, with people now having to run heating systems and lights in many more locations, but I do understand that savings may have resulted from less travel demands. So I do thank you, Councillor Lehman, and the officers for the report. I welcome most of the progress. We are still in relatively early days in this process, and I hope that the next report makes for better reading in the areas mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Now, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's never helpful when the notes aren't quite right, is it? Right, so I do welcome the report and thank the time and effort that's been put in by the officers over many years, officers that aren't with us now, councillors that aren't with us now, and those that still are with us. There are elements of this that are impressive. We set out with a very ambitious target in 2019, And let's be very blunt, nobody in 2019 thought that we were going to lose 2 years sitting at home and trying to support our residents through the worst, one of the worst crises this country has seen in many, many moons. There are elements that we can learn. I think we still have situations where developers agree to landscaping plans that help biodiversity and help reduce their carbon emissions, and then don't submit a management plan for that landscaping, so we can't actually enforce anything upon them when the trees die. So we do need to get better at that. We heard from the fellow opposition member there, Councillor Bowen, around the ignoring of Sheppey. I wouldn't say that Sheppey was ignored. In actual fact, I remember back in 2020 we discussed quite a lot, how do we get the car share scheme over there? How do we get the electric car charging points over there? And our biggest barrier was good old UK Power Network saying that we couldn't have a substation. So there are outside elements. We have to work in partnership. We also have to look through at what we can do to help others, to help us reduce the borough's impact. Now, we're coming to the end of fleet lives for the likes of Southern Housing's van stock, for the firm I work for's van stock, and many other who operate in the borough. We've already done the thing of going all electric, so we know what the pitfalls are. We can help those partners to get it right first time. And we should be proud of that, and we should be doing that. It is a good report. In terms of our active travel, Councillor Perkin would slap me around the back of the head if I didn't mention it. There are elements that we need to consider more widely when we're looking at our active travel arrangements to ensure that we are doing everything to consider the disabled amongst our populace when making those decisions, making sure that they work. Sometimes we put in those little barriers in an alleyway to stop a motorbike getting through, and that means the mobility scooter can't get through either. So we do have to bear that in mind too. There's also the question mark around some of the reduction in domestic gas use. How much of that is down to affordability? How many people are just not putting it on because they can't afford to put it on? We've got a long way. We haven't hit the target that we set ourselves, but we knew that was ambitious. There's a long way still to go, but I think there's still more we can do without necessarily having to spend our own money going forward. It's about partnership. It's about working together, and it's about doing what's right for the borough and overall for the nation. Thanks very much.
Councillor Martin, thank you. I'm going to open it up to members. Councillor Clark, you indicated.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I welcome this report and I congratulate all the officers and the members of the Environment Committee for the hard work that is being put in on this. There's just one thing I'd like to highlight is the anti-idling campaign that goes along with the ecological emergency and environmental emergency. I speak to my own ward, but it probably happens across the borough. Twice a day at school drop-off time and at school pick-up time, we not only have parents who are turning up quite early and sitting outside schools with their engines running, we have the bus partners, both in Bell Road and also in Adelaide Drive, that arrive over an hour early and sit there with their engines running. Now, having spoken with officers, I have managed to get some signage put up in my ward with regard to this. And the officers, the enforcement officers have been going round and issuing tickets to drivers who refuse to turn their engines off and also to those that are parked on double yellow lines. But unfortunately, the scheme for putting up the anti-idling signs and for the officer, the enforcement officers going round runs out today. Which is unfortunate, as now we're not going to have the level of enforcement behind stopping both private residents in their cars and the buses just rocking up and sitting there for hours with their engines idling. So I just thought I'd like to raise that as we're talking through this environmental report, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm absolutely delighted that the council was planting trees because I think everyone knows that broadleaf trees absorb carbon from the carbon dioxide and emit oxygen, which is what we breathe. I'm older than anyone here, so I can remember in London, and I would suggest that the London plane trees were extremely good at getting rid of pollutants. But could I ask that we do what we can to plant more broadleaf trees in cooperation with somebody or other people, because I think it will improve the quality of air for people. So I think it's very important, and maybe make conditions on where sites are developed, that the developers have to put the proper trees in that'll actually do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Harrison?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When this was presented back in 2019, it was very aspirational and ambitious. But if you don't reach for the stars, how the hell can you even get to the moon? Or the other way round? That's what it's all about. The majority of the bits that we haven't hit are beyond our control. I would like to be able to control the government from Swale House, this chamber. Unfortunately, it's not within our gift. And then the other thing that Councillor Bowen mentioned, Swale House, yes, Tory white elephant. That was the leaflet we put round when you were proposing to buy this place all those years ago. We said it's a white elephant. It's been left empty for years. Who in their right mind would buy this building? Swale Conservatives. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Thomas? Oh, Thompson. Sorry.
That's all right. All right, sorry, yeah. Just a couple of points, really. One that was interesting about transport was that, just on a quick glance, that since the 1980s we were at 5% of private transport for pupils to school. We're now in the 2020s at 40%. So maybe there's something we can do around restricting parking and control of private vehicles to schools. But one of the big things which I thought everyone in here could maybe commit to a bit more is a plant-based diet, or not a fully plant-based diet, but definitely a restriction in meat and dairy. We know that that's a quarter of our air pollution comes from that. So whether we decide personally to do something on that is a very, very easy choice with no cost implication. In fact, probably save you money. So that was all.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
That's all right.
Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the thing I wanted to highlight in there was the role of the Active Travel Coordinator, which was a post that was originally funded out of the special projects funding, yeah, which I think has more than repaid the investment that was made in that, and I'm very pleased that the council has made that post more permanent, and is a unique one for Swale, that we have someone who is actively campaigning to coordinate and enable these things to happen, which probably otherwise would not have done so. And I think taking that initiative and having someone who can actually guide these projects to fruition, like the crosstown walking project that's come to fruition in Faversham, has been a very welcome development, and I'm glad to see that his role will continue for as long as possible, because I think it does unlock funding that otherwise we would not have got. And it isn't just cyclists, but that's a walking project, so it will benefit those who are moving with mobility scooters and things like that to actually get across the town without having to run the gauntlet of the motor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. I totally agree about the active travel post. It's been amazing, and being part of a lot of those committees and the walks being planned, it's been really terrific for the borough, and like you say, unique. Councillor Wise, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this report shows that we've done really well in the progress that we've made as a district council. And I agree with Councillor Bowen that a new date for future progress would be welcome. But if you look at the progress we've made compared to the government's ambitions outlined, they first outlined their ambitions for the environment in 2018. It became the Environment Act in 2021. Lots of the signature things they outlined, like the deposit return scheme, food waste collections, reforestation and biodiversity efforts, the first two have been pushed back till 2026. So that's 8 years. The reforestation and biodiversity efforts have only started being fleshed out as of last year, and it goes back to Councillor Shields' question that our contributions towards their national net zero target require certainty over funding, and we don't have that to fulfil that. So actually, when you look at the progress this administration's made since 2019, they've done stuff in that period. A lot of the stuff outlined now 6 years ago from the government has still yet to be progressed. So I think we should commend people for the vast progress they have made.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. Councillor Booth, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not one for normally applauding officers for doing their job, which they get paid for, so I won't do that. It's a start, isn't it, Madam Mayor? It is a start. However, there's a couple of things, one of which has already been made mention of by Councillor Clark regarding parking outside of schools. I think this council needs to up the game and liaise with those heads of the schools within this borough to actually fight against the growing appetite to drop Timmy and Mary at school every day and then pick them up in the afternoon. Comment has been made about the island, and I will come back to that. But in Eastchurch is very proud to have what they term as a walking crocodile, and they still maintain that. So the youngsters are dropped by their parents, who have this insatiable appetite to drive them to school, on the outskirts of the village. They congregate as children and then walk into school. It alleviates a lot of traffic problems. So lessons can be learned. So I urge the leader to engage with that particular item. The title is Annual Climate and Ecological Emergency Progress Report. I think we're missing a big picture here. Just a quick show of hands, who has driven here this evening? Well, slowly hands going up, so yeah, the majority. So people will have noticed the utterly disgraceful state of the road network coming into Swale. Now, that's not potholes. I'm not going to wave that flag. This is detritus that people throw from their vehicles each and every day, and we drive past each and every day. It is disgusting. It is disgusting. Now, why do I bring that up, Madam Mayor? With a fair throw of a stone from here, you can hit the largest industrial commercial park in Kent. Not everybody living in Swale works there. It attracts thousands of people every single day. Now, I'm quite proud of being a man from Kent. I'm not going to get into that argument. But when I travel in and out of this county virtually every single day, and I travel into the home counties and in London, we are a laughing stock. Let me assure you, Madam Mayor, we are a laughing stock. Just because that education has not got through. Now, again, through the leader, I urge that this council works with its partners. That would be Kent County Council and National Highways today. There might be something else tomorrow. In to get our roads cleaned up. Most of us will use the A249. I know there's a split relationship with people that cleanse that road, but it is the main route, the only route to the Isle of Sheppey, which just happens to be the final destination for thousands of holidaymakers every single year. And what greets them on their journey to their mobile homes and their chalets? The crap, excuse my Spanish, that adorns the A249. Now, we can say, yes, there's lots of roadworks. This isn't roadwork, detritus. This is fast food wrappers, you name it. When you stop at the roundabouts, when you stop at the traffic lights, just look at the hard shoulder, look at the central reservation. And I beg anybody to say, yeah, that's acceptable. No, it's not acceptable. So when you state an ecological emergency, that's the thing that people coming to this borough to work and on holiday will see and will take home. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Councillor Nundy, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the report. It does make for interesting reading. There is some good stuff in there about improving active travel, which I fully agree with. But I think in order to have fully active travel on the Isle of Sheppey, this council is going to need to badger highways and it's going to need to badger KCC to improve the lower roads on the Isle of Sheppey, because that road is not safe to cycle down. And if we want to encourage people to start cycling, they should be able to cycle across the entire borough, not just in Sittingbourne and Faversham, but on the Isle of Sheppey as well. There is one bit of cycle path from Barton's Point that leads down to Castard Corner, but apart from that, the rest of the lower road isn't safe to cycle. So I would like to see this council pushing KCC and highways to actually improving the road network on the island, get more cycle paths put in around some of the key areas so that people can safely cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nundy. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. And just listening to all the good stuff that we keep saying is happening, all the trees being planted, it's all great. The active travel coordinator, all brilliant stuff we're doing. Yet in the Meads, nothing gets done. We've got trees, and I raised it this time last year about trees on Swale Council land that had died years ago that hadn't been replanted, and I was promised that they would be. They still haven't been done. And even through pushing at any chance I can get, I've now been told that, yes, we'll get the trees planted, but we haven't got resources in this planting season. It will have to be done in next year. This is 4 years to get trees planted on Swale Council land. And the travel coordinator, yeah, it sounds good. We've got these little booklets coming out and we can publish where paths and get everybody walking. Yet the Meads was taken out of it because it's not pretty enough. Now, these sorts of things just show that some wards out there are being completely missed off and not looked. And if it is so important that we have trees done for the local people living there, and footpaths and cycle paths for active travel and getting people out, there's some wards that don't even get a look in. And I think if we're not going to be meeting our targets, some of that is probably because there's wards out there, and as the island's been mentioned as well, aren't even getting anything done. So yeah, the climate change and everything is important, but we need to be fair and make sure every ward across the borough is actually looked at and make sure changes are brought in and put into place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. And it's Councillor Whiting, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've welcome the report. It's an update of where we are. We're not where we hoped we might be by now. And I think there's plenty of reasons why that is, and we don't need to go into them. But it's good that the report does talk about the actions moving forward and how various groups of members and officers will be moving forward and coming up with plans to get to where we need to be in the coming years. I'd just like, if I may, while I'm standing, just to give Councillor Monday some comfort. I too think the active travel officer is money well spent. I've been working with him and a group on Sheppey to open up a cycleway on the line of the old Sheppey Light Railway called the Sheppey Light Railway Greenway Group. We've managed to get Kent County Council to make that its #1 walking and cycling priority in the county, which is good news. And KCC has already put some money into that project. So that project's moving forward to try to create a new cycleway away from the lower road where it would be safe, not just for cyclists, but for walkers and for horse riders as well as a bridleway. So there's plenty of work going on, but much of it is thanks to the good works of our officer in working with that group to move that forward, and just pay tribute to the bunch of volunteers that have already started work clearing paths, and they are now in use where they weren't in use up until a few months ago, and they've been barren for years. We're now getting people walking and cycling along new routes on Sheppey away from the roads where they can do so safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Councillor Bonney.
Thank you. I welcome this report, and I think, as Councillor Harrison said, you have to have something to aim for. I think what is I think this discussion tonight from various sides of the chamber has shown is that we can do what we can do with the limited resources that we have. However, there are certain parties that are majorly falling down. One of those is the government dragging its heels and not being ambitious. But secondly, I particularly, Councillor Booth, your points around rubbish and environmental impact is my bugbear. Over the last few years, I've had a number of discussions with Highways England and their subcontractor, because we're in this ridiculous situation of a PFI project on the A249 / the bridge, this weird contracting position for infrastructure where we clear the lay-bys, but the rest of it is down to the contractor, and it's actually down to the authority, the PFI authority. That's not us. It's also down to KCC, who seem to have a complete blind spot when it comes to swale and rubbish on our highways, the A249, and the absolute shambles of Junction 5, which is an utter disgrace. Yes, we get an awful lot of industrial traffic servicing our very large industrial parks around Swale. However, it's no excuse that the bottles of whatever urine chucked out the window along with everything else is left to fester. And Highways England we've had on the ropes, blaming each other's internal departments, so let's put that on the record. And they have promised that when they hand back Junction 5, the contractor does, that they will be regularly clearing it. So I think the onus is on all of us to get on their backs and give them no end of grief. So I think it's not just chairs of committees, but members individually, county members, district members, all of us, to moan about it, because it is an embarrassment. You drive up and down the country and Swale somehow seems to be left out of the equation. But the other thing where we fall down, and it is a really big one, is public transport. I represent a ward now where we have a non-existent bus service. Never before in 16 years of representing my ward have we had such poor public infrastructure. And that is only down to one thing, and that's that Conservative government and our Conservative County Council who've cut and shredded our public transport, especially for the rural economy. It's devastating. So we can do as we wish. But I look along the other side of the room and you put pressure within your internal party to get our public services, including our transport, in order. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney. Anybody else wanting to speak? If not, I'll ask Councillor Worcester to speak now, as she reserved a right.
Thank you. I will speak, if that's okay. So I will put a caveat to this, is that obviously I only heard that Councillor Lehman wasn't attending this evening at very short notice. And just to let Councillor Lehman know, I will be available for notes tomorrow when you want to pick me up on how I do this. So I'm going to pick up a few points. First being ways of doing business. So from my experience, very limited though it is, I prefer our way of doing business, which is to aim high and then come just under, rather than the national example, which is to set very low targets, make them, pat yourself on the back, but those actions are incredibly ineffectual for those people that have to deal with the consequences, which are our residents. A few other points, recycling. Glad it was brought up in the report. Major push on recycling and food collection, which is pushing on past Marine Town implementation and actions for the best value that we have. So you would expect us to follow the data, which, as far as I'm aware, we are doing, to make sure that the council tax money that is spent on these actions is being the most effective where it is spent. So obviously following the data is the way to go with that. Active travel success. Absolutely amazing work on active transport and especially that networking that our active transport coordinator does with his partners, for instance at KCC. It is great work and it shows that actually under these reports comes more than just what's written on the paper, but a real opportunity to follow what's in our corporate plan, which is reaching out, making better partnerships, working together, making us stronger as a community moving forward, which I'm pleased to see that the Environment Committee is helping to sustain and push forward through the whole council. That isn't just in active transport, we can also see that very actively through our planning, that we want to see our environmental concerns pushed through committees and our work, including through our planning committee. So I'm quite pleased that's taking place. Anti-idling work going on past schools. Obviously, schools are not a Swale Borough Council concern. That's a KCC concern and a Department of Education concern. But the anti-idling campaign has given us the opportunity to reach out again in partnership with untreaded partnerships that Swale has encountered before. So that can only be applauded. And those residents have received that anti-idling scheme with absolute joy, if I can say so, not just from parents walking small children past, but those residents that suffer from COPD or other ailments and issues regarding idling outside of schools. And of course, KCC pushing for the destruction of bus routes hasn't helped anti-idling campaign outside of schools. So we must make sure that those decisions are placed where they live, which is at a KCC decision level, not a Swale level. So again, it's important to have that. Tree planting, very successful, but that does give us rise to another...
Time, councillor.
Sorry, quickly then, success in that we still need to look at the destruction and vandalism of these trees after they've been planted. So working with the Community Safety Network and Kent Police, that has got some progress to do as well. And the very last one, which is steering groups. If, for instance, you feel that your concern or issue hasn't been raised appropriately, this isn't really the arena for it. We do have an active steering group. One person from each political party is on that. I recommend going back to that person, getting those updates, making sure that you're aware of what's going on in the steering group and adding to it. Thank you very much. Apologies for pushing.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, point of information, if I may.
Yes.
The council has made accusations that are inaccurate and wrong yet again. For the record, Kent County Council do not set the bus routes. It is the bus operators that do that, for the record. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Right, I'm going to ask members now to vote on the recommendations to note. Yep. Vote to vote. Those in favour? Noted the recommendations. Okay, that's unanimous. Fantastic. Okay, agenda 11 has actually been withdrawn from the agenda in order for the P&R committee that can firstly agree the minutes for accuracy at its meeting next week. So I will be closing the meeting. You are all welcome to the parlour to join me in a drink following the meeting. Thank you, councillors.